Thank you.
All right. All right, we're streaming. Go.
Okay, well, back from
Yeah.
before we got cut off. I don't know exactly at what point we got cut off, but I was talking about where how the traditions have changed, where they came from, and I kind of got to the Fragile Path and why they came together to fight the Order of Reason. And I was saying you kind of have to go back to when the game was created. It started out as a different game. I don't know all the details of that different game, but just that they looked at it when it was done and went, "Okay, we did more
No.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the storyteller screen from first edition, the art's inside the cover of Deluxe. That's from that original game concept, and you can look at it and immediately tell it's a totally different game. But they had these 9 traditions plus the hollow ones, and that was supposed to sort of encompass everything. They did what they did with a lot of the first edition Old World of Darkness games, and they did these 9 buckets. And it was supposed to be broad, and it quickly became apparent it didn't exactly work. So by the time you got around to the Sorcerer's Crusade Renaissance story, which was developed by the first original, or the first line developer, Phil, who wasn't involved in the actual first edition book, but from the very first source book, like he became line developer, they handed him the finished book, and they went, "Good luck, we have no idea what to do with this."
Yeah, right?
He's talked about it in a few interviews. And so he looked at it and went, wow, there's a lot missing here. The first thing he did was go and add the Alabatine, which goes back to Sorcerer's Crusade, and they originally had the seat of correspondence, or connection, as it was called back then. And the Solificati, who were alchemists, originally had the seat of matter. Yeah, they originally had the seat of matter. And their seat ended up going to the Society of Ether, originally the Sons of Ether and the Modern, and then the Connection seat ended up going to the Virtual Adepts, but they were both empty for a long time. And for most of the tradition's history, and this is the interesting thing about them, they were really ineffectual. They did not do a good job. Their whole origin story in Fragile Path is basically all about the fact that they can't work together.
Does not play well with others.
No, which
makes sense, though.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of the core of Mage. It's kind of, everybody has this view of how they, not even so much how they believe reality works. It starts out as that when you first awaken, but it quickly turns into how you want reality to work. And the Technocratic Union, while they're a lot more limited because they have this much more structured view of the world and they can't go outside of it, they at least agree they're all part of a single vision. The traditions do not have that. And it's only in recent times have they kind of gotten over that hump. It sort of started when they let the Electrodyne engineers in. After they were kicked out of the Technocracy, they became the Sons of Ether later.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was about to say, that sounds like the Sons of Ether.
They were the Electrodyne engineers in the Technocracy, and then they discarded that name when they left the Technocracy to sever ties. And the traditions were just so desperate. They were so down on their luck. And by down on their luck, I mean down on their, wow, we're bad at this. And they said, okay, well, we'll take you in. And most of them, it left a really dirty.
Well, they brought in the Void Engineers and the Sons of Ether, yeah?
No, they never, the Virtual Adepts.
Oh, Virtual Adepts, that's right.
Yeah. Void Engineers are still in the Technocracy. In early editions, there were hints that the Void Engineers were maybe on the edge of quitting. Like, they didn't like the Technocracy, they kind of were on the edge of defecting, and that was a plot hook. In more recent books, that has been, I don't want to say it's been retconned. It's basically been tweaked so that, yeah, the Void Engineers don't really like being in the Technocracy, but they're not going anywhere for really compelling reasons, but that's not the traditions. But yeah, when the traditions let the Electrodyne engineers in, it kind of started a shift for them where they were like, okay, if we can put up with these really insufferably wacky technocrats, we ought to be able to put up with each other. And then they let in the virtual adepts when the virtual adepts, I think, left the technocracy. They weren't kicked out. They chose to leave.
They just said, fuck you guys, but screw you guys, I'm going home.
Basically, yeah. And so then they let the virtual adepts in. And not to say that there aren't tensions. I mean, the Verbena still really don't like either of those guys. But...
Well, it's because it's the antithesis of what the nature magic thing, yeah?
Exactly. But they'll work together. And that's really recent. Like, in the canon, that's maybe the second half of the 20th century tops that had started to come together. So for most of the tradition's history, they were this group of ludicrously powerful mages organized under the guise of, we're going to stop these dirty Daedalans, but man, we can't decide how we're going to do it. It's really interesting, because in all the other games, you have a lot more vision. Like the Camarilla, the Sabbat, even the werewolves, as much as they love to fight each other, when it comes right down to it, they will get together to fight the Wyrm or their non-wolf cousins for kicks.
Yeah.
You know, mages are stupid powerful and really bad at collaborating.
Well, that may be a check on that power in some way.
It is, but I don't know that it's a designed one. Like, there's certain checks where it's designed, it's there.
Okay, Paradox, that's...
Yeah, Paradox is an intentional one. Having played 2 years of Sorcerer's Crusade now, and having talked with other people about the game, that antagonism kind of just emerged naturally from the story. My players always get into those paradigmatic fights. I have this perspective on how the universe should work, and you're wrong, even though you're in my cabal. I mean, just framing characters around that concept of, I know how reality should function, and I'm going to make it function that way, does really interesting things to the way you end up playing.
Oh,
yeah. You have something to add there, Eric?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mage is an interesting game.
I have nothing to argue with, you know?
Ah, come on, you can come up with something.
There'll be something.
At the moment, I'm kind of stoned, you know?
Right? It's kind of hard to get all antagonistic when you're that high. So you're Cult of Ecstasy Mage, are you?
Oh, yeah.
Well. So, yeah, Eric, how much have you played the traditions?
Wow. I'm actually having to think way back. Mostly, I mean, probably when like Second Ed and Revised were just coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's been a good hot minute. I'm trying to remember everything because I mean, like I said, there were so many different rules that for a while there it just got hard to maintain anything. So a lot of the Mage chronicles and stuff that were going on in my area folded really quick. But then when Revised came out, a lot of them picked back up again. And whenever that came out, we mostly played Technocracy.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because, you had Guide to the Technocracy, which was a Second Ed book. That was a Phil Mercado book. And that was really the book that, was like, hey, the Technocracy aren't really, mustache-twirling villains. But mostly I hear people talk about, oh yeah, we're going to leave these traditions and play the Technocracy in Revised. And there's a really interesting reframing in Revised where prior to that move over into that edition, it had all been like, hope. And I mean, hope is terribly dangerous because hope fails, and tragedy. But Mage was a pretty hopeful game. Like, you're fighting on the front of the war to save reality. And then the opening to Revised was like, nope, you lost, good luck. It's like, oh, wait,
pretty
what?
much, right?
Wait, what happened? But that's when everybody talked about, oh yeah, kinder, gentler technology. And I don't know, maybe it's because people like playing the guys who won.
Well, yeah, most people do.
I found, like, a lot of the people I played with, like, I really like Dream Speakers and Euthanatos, but most of the people I played with, they liked the ones that were, like, the technocracy, or at the very least, you know, more technology-focused, because they figured that was a way to kind of protect them from Paradox, because they could just use gadgets and stuff, and, you know, sleepers would be more accepting of the works that they were doing in that. So that's what I found was the reason a lot of people, from my experiences, were doing technocratic games was...
And I just think that's so funny, because anybody can play Coincidental if you try hard enough.
Oh, yeah.
But only the tradition mages can choose to be vulgar. Like, the technocracy can be a little vulgar, they can be kind of vulgar, they can be, hey, everyone thinks that plasma rifle is only a thing in video games, don't go pulling it out in the middle of the street.
Exactly. Or summoning a digital demon in the middle of Times Square.
Yeah, they have to put a lot more effort into it. It's a lot harder for them to do vulgar magic than it is for the traditions. And generally speaking, if you start with a low-level game, you can't really do it at all.
Yeah.
You just aren't allowed to. And so I always thought that was interesting. Like, in my Sorcerer's Crusade game, I originally wanted it to be a joint Daedalin tradition game. That's what I wanted to do. And in Sorcerer's Crusade, that's viable, despite the whole propaganda story about, oh, we were formed to stop the evil Daedalins. Things were mushy in the Renaissance. There wasn't really a lot of monolithic power. Even the Order of Reason had a lot more leeway than the Technocratic Union does. And so I created a setting where they could cooperate. They wouldn't love each other, but they could cooperate. Nobody would play Daedalin. No one would do it. I could not. Like, after the game...
So you couldn't even pay somebody.
Pretty much. I mean, once the game had been going for a year... Somebody played a Void Seeker for a while, and then that player dropped out of the game. But really, I could not get anybody to play Daedalin.
Huh.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's like fun stuff to me.
Oh, I know.
But
I love the Daedalins.
I really wish a lot of our Mage games would have lasted a lot longer than they did, because I was always having a lot of fun with it. Mostly because no matter what game it is, I always end up doing like really strange things, period.
Yeah.
So I find ways to use the rules to kind of sometimes annoy people, you know. And Mage is really good for that.
Mage is really good for that.
Because, I mean, yeah, you can kind of form all kinds of like weird ideas that you have going on, and there's something in Mage that'll fit that. Which is one of the things I really like about it, is because there are so many different concepts that you can just kind of plug into it that it just lends itself to having all kinds of fun.
Yeah, well, and that kind of gets to one of the other interesting things that I feel like impacts the traditions of the technocracy, and that's the whole street level, not street level thing. There's been kind of this ongoing debate in the fan base kind of since Revised came out, because Revised, one of the things they wanted to push was the masters are gone, this is about living on the streets, and sure, you have magic, but no, we're not gonna do high flying crazy stuff. Make the game more approachable. And for the technocracy, it's pretty easy. Like, if you make a starting PC technocrat, you're in an amalgam, you get assignments, you're not a mover and shaker. But a starting PC tradition mage, as long as you're not a member of the Order of Hermes, because they're pretty... if you play them the way they're written, they're almost as stifling as the technocracy. In terms of, like, you have a house, you have somewhere you're assigned, you do what you're told. The rest of the traditions, you have a fair bit of freedom. You can kind of do what you want, as long as you don't do anything that's so atrocious that it actually, like, would cause them to discipline you. And that isn't like, oh, you were naughty. That's like, oh, you associated with marauders and demons, and we need to have a conversation. So yeah, I mean, they're the ones that can kind of get into the high-flying, crazy stuff. And so I felt like the Avatar Storm and the Masters being gone impacted them a lot more than it impacted the Technocracy. But I know a lot of people who liked it. They loved that stuff.
Oh, yeah. I just forgot what I was going to say.
Oh. Short-term memory loss, man.
Oh, wow. It's been one of those weeks, man.
I'll bet.
It happens.
Just nonstop show. Yeah, just come back to me in a second. Now. If I think of what the hell I was going to talk about, I'll pop right in.
Okay. That works for me. And for those of y'all in the channel, if you've got a question, let us know.
Have questions on us.
Well, the New Order's usually pretty good at that.
So, Jake, you mentioned the Euthanatos. Have you played Euthanatos before?
I played Euthanatos, and I've played Dream Speakers, and I played one Order of Hermes when we did a game where we basically, like everybody I'm sure has done that at least once in their life, where you make characters based on yourself. I assigned I looked at the traditions, and I'm like, well, the one that would probably suit me the most would be Order of Hermes, so I played Order of Hermes Mage. I found the Euthanatos actually was really easy to do coincidental magic without nerfing them. Like you said, like it's a lot easier for the traditions to do vulgar magics, but with when you're like dealing with like entropy and fate and luck, it's a lot easier to just happen. You can't make a lot of coincidences in your favor, but I actually did a thing where I would purposefully hit myself periodically with bad luck as a way to kind of try to counter the problems with having too much good luck. So I would, So and it wasn't like it was triggering like the paradox bleed or whatever, but it was just I'm like, okay, so because the whole concept is that if you have too much good luck in a row, it becomes consensual reality starts to fight back. So I was like, well, I'm going to hit myself with bad luck periodically, so consensual reality kind of turns a blind eye when I need it to.
Yeah, and that's a really good idea, and it's not an official system, but it's kind of a tradition version of something they wrote about the Technocracy early on, in that one of the ways the Technocracy deals with paradox is by designing paradox into their wonders. So things like exhaust on cars in the World of Darkness, that's the Technocracy like just being like, well, we know there's going to be a paradox effect, so we're going to kind of tease this to like into a paradox effect we can manage. The kind of expectation of computer bugs and how they show up and how they can be debugged, all of that is paradox that they've kind of like nudged into a vaguely predictable form. Like, it's annoying and everyone would like it more if it was not there, but it's better than the random chaos of unmanaged paradox. Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing. And I always thought it'd be interesting if someone spent some time to write up ways that more inventive tradition mages do that. So I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just made sense to me, especially because I think at the time I had I think the other two players were Sons of Ether, so they all had their gadget, and one virtual adept, so they all had like their gadgets and their computers and stuff. And I'm like, all right, so basically they're running around and they're doing all this shit, and I'm like, I want to be useful, so yeah. And sometimes, it was just stuff that was more annoying than anything else. I think like the one thing is I arranged it so I pretty much hit every red light in the city, so that if I was in a car chase, I could make it so I could hit all the green lights. Do it when I need it. Sometimes just annoying little stuff like that, or
I like it.
But I just tried to think of ways that I could try to keep myself active and not necessarily do crazy ass shit. And definitely did not want bad luck to explode into my face uncontrollably.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see as a storyteller basically being like, okay, so this is the equivalent of taking a flaw at character creation, so it's going to have to impact you somehow. And I could see some really interesting ways to manage that, where like anytime you're not actively giving yourself good luck, there's kind of this vague, annoying aura of stuff.
That's why I really liked Resonance from Revised. I really liked the Resonance mechanic. To me, that made so much sense.
I don't know. I didn't love keeping track of it on your character sheet. I didn't love all the ways they did that, especially there was this weird thing where Resonance would like add dice to effects. That part was weird, but I liked being aware of what resonance you were leaning towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I never used the revised system because I thought keeping track of dots was a little weird, but I love the impact resonance has on mages. My favorite Euthanatos character, actually, less about like the luck and entropy, but one of my players in my first long mage campaign played a Euthanatos surgeon, and she was a brilliant surgeon, but every time that anyone ended up on her surgery table, she would read their fate and read their mind and see what they did with their life, and whenever anyone particularly toxic or abusive or terrible ended up on her table, well, that surgery just didn't go very well.
Oops.
And I thought it was a really interesting concept.
That is a good way to...
Yeah, Judge, Jury, and Executioner and all that shit, but...
I mean, that's not... Like,
yeah. Not as familiar with most of the other pillars as I am with the Order of Hermes, of course, for obvious fucking reasons.
Well, we could, I don't know how much the people listening in know, but we could actually just, like, go down the traditions and talk about them.
Okay.
Probably wouldn't be a bad
That would actually probably be best.
All right, let's...
If we're talking about them.
Since I've got the page open, let's start with the Aibaten. The Bettini.
Oh, I love them.
But we'll do it after this, and it's all about Paradox.
Oh, I love Paradox.
Well, wait a minute. Before we get started, go with it.
Oh, all right. Okay, so, one of the biggest, I guess, issues that always causes arguments within Mage is Paradox. Mainly, what started off as the system of preventing players from just,
from throwing fireballs in New York, yeah. Paradox backlash is a bad thing.
Yeah. I want to compare it almost to playing between Shadow and Wraith. As to, go to a different, like, from one mage game to another. And, some people, like myself, whenever I run something like that, is enforce it like crazy. Or there's others that just pretend it doesn't exist. And for me, I always the World of Darkness to me has always been about grim and gritty things, because that's kind of, the way.
It's story of personal horror, and that's pretty much, doesn't matter what system you're playing, it's all pretty fucked up.
My point is that, personal horror is vampire. Each savage horror is werewolf, and mage has its own kind of, mental horror, whereas, like, if you look at those three books, vampire is social, werewolf is physical, and mages are really mental, so you get to really mind fuck people.
Yeah.
But my point is that, I guess I want to pose this question to everybody else, kind of, what sort of, how many different, what level of paradox do you guys like to see or enforce, actually? which goes back to that thing you were talking about where everybody's making, guns that do this, and that's just another workaround that major mechanic. So there you go.
Victor, go ahead.
So, I haven't actually played with Paradox in a long time because I've been playing Sorcerer's Crusade, and in that time setting, Paradox hasn't fully come together. You have something else called Scourge, and I love Scourge infinitely more than Paradox. I think it is just way more fun. The way Scourge works is you get it the same way you get Paradox. The rules for collecting it are almost exactly the same. If you do what's called Vein Magic, it's a little different than Vulgar Magic because Belief's a little different in 1500. But basically the same concept, basically. If you do Vein Magic, you get, a Scourge. If you botch, you get a whole bunch. It's basically the same ratios. But what it does to you once you have it is totally different. So every time you do any kind of magic, if you have Scourge, you throw an extra die for every 5 dots of Scourge you have. Like at 6 points of Scourge, you throw a second die. And if you get a 1 on any of those dies, all of your Scourge burns off, and it does something. If you get a 10 on any of those dies, all your Scourge burns off, and it does something. If you get a 1, it's bad for you. If you get a 10, it's awesome for you.
Ah.
And so it turns into this weird, terrifying game of chicken.
Yeah.
I've got 7 Scourge. Oh God. Do I do magic? And I had a 7-point Scourge burn off that was a 10 in my game, but I had a couple 6s that were 1s. And I think it's a lot more interesting, and it psychologically impacts the characters a lot more. I love the idea of Scourge. I love the way of Paradox. I love the way it's written in the fiction, especially for the Technocracy. The 2008 crash is a Syndicate Paradox effect. I love that. I love it.
I didn't know the Technocracy had an issue with Paradox.
Oh, yeah. They are pushing the bounds of reality, and sometimes they push way too hard.
Summoning an Elder God.
Think about how hard and fast technology has grown in the last quarter century, half century. Yeah, they still they push themselves far.
And I mean, every unexpected side effect of that technology in Mage is kind of a Paradox effect. The thing is, that's all flavor, and it's connected to the magic, and it's really interesting, and it has far-reaching implications way beyond the Mage. I love Paradox in the fiction. I hate the system. It is the only thing in Mage I actually despise. Because the system is, okay, you have some Paradox. Okay, it's over 5. Okay, you had a backlash. Take some bashing damage. Another little bad thing happened. Woo. And I'm like, no, it's so boring.
Is that I like the crazy Mage stuff, the Sorcerer's Crusade, and being able to cast, all this other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the system itself, it sucks for Paradox, but you don't have to use it.
Well, no, page 95. We just go back to, do what you got to do. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. Well, that's up to the storyteller, of course, but...
Well...
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get across is the theme that you like for the most Mage. You want it to fit in with the rest of the World of Darkness, or if you like to harken back to the Sorcerer's Crusade stuff.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people, in my opinion, both are great. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love slinging spells just as much as the other dude, that's like fun stuff.
Mm.
But, I always got some of the most creative thinking players out of, really making that Paradox screw them over. And instead of slinging spells around, they're going to have to find a gun.
Pick and choose, yeah. What do I really want to do this?
Yeah, and so I inflicted a lot of that on my players in Sorcerer's Crusade, actually.
Okay.
Because because there is a fair bit of that, and we also traveled all over the world, so they had to deal with constantly shifting rules on what was and wasn't Vayne. And I think that that's a really interesting angle to take. In the modern setting, when I say I can't stand Paradox, that really is just the system. And the only reason that I struggle a little bit with Golden Ruling Paradox is I haven't found a great alternative for it. Just in terms of this
Scourge sounds like a good alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way Scourge flows, and the next time I run Modern Mage, I might try that random die dynamic, but just take away the 10 option, because in the modern era, Paradox is never good for you.
Never good.
No. I might try that. The thing I really want to capture, because I think this also taps into some of the horror of Mage. For me, the horror of Mage is you're totally convinced you're right. Totally powerful enough to make yourself right. But that has ramifications, and at the end of the day, when you're done with the fight and you go home and you look in the mirror, some part of you knows you might be the bad guy. Because nobody's a good guy in Mage. Like, for me, I really want things that punch that theme. The hubris, I totally think I'm right because my belief in my paradigm is so strong I can shape reality. But every once in a while it cracks. And, that's horror for me is in those moments.
Oh, right.
And that's why the 2008 financial crash being a Syndicate Paradox effect is, I love that.
That was great.
I read that sidebar in the Syndicate convention book over and over again. I want those sorts of paradox effects for the traditions.
I'm with you on that. I mean, that sounds really good. Plus, I mean, for me, if the players know that something very adverse is going to happen if they swing a fireball down Main Street, they're going to have, like I said, they're going to think a lot more about how to do things, and Plus, also, you've got, as far as the mental kind of horror kind of thing keeps going between the Nefandi and the technocracy, you've got two different feelings: one of complete madness and one of complete cold logic. Which makes for interesting things, whereas everything of the traditions runs kind of like in between the two extremes.
Okay, well, we got an hour, so let's, New Wave really would like to hear about the pillars, so
okay.
Let's start with the Alhibaten.
You were saying Alibat. Well, okay, so you were saying Alibaten, so what list are you looking at?
I'm looking at the Council of Nine Mystic Traditions.
So
at the wiki.
Yeah, but from where?
At the wiki. It's easier to pull up since I don't have... I do have the Mage book, but I try to not to flip pages because it's noisy.
The Alibaten, at least for Mage 20, the Alibaten are disparates and not part of the nine traditions.
So, how about we actually go through the spheres instead of doing the traditions?
Okay. I was actually getting...
We can talk about the traditions?
So each of the 9 seats corresponds to one of the spheres, and so we can pick a sphere and then talk about all of the traditions that have held that seat throughout history. So we will end up hitting the Alibaten if we do that, but we'll end up talking about them specifically in the context of their time in the traditions.
Well, they're even listed at the top of the traditions.
Well,
here too.
Yeah, they have a weird story. Like they're really wound up in the forming of the traditions, but they are no longer a tradition.
Okay, but they were. And
they held the seat of connection or correspondence in the modern era, which is simply put teleportation, the mystic understanding that space and separation and distance is a lie, and
teleporters.
Kind of, sort of. That's the simplest way to think of it. But they are an Islamic tradition. I saw in an interview from Phil, who's the dev, that the first thing he did when he got a hold of the first edition book, he looked at it, he went, there's no one from Islam here. And it is one of the largest, it's the second largest
religion on the planet.
The second largest and the fastest growing.
And the fastest growing, yeah.
That is a huge oversight. This needs to be fixed. And so,
And they have some really cool myths, too. They do the whole gin and the Ifrit and all that cool shit.
Hell, so the Jinn and the Ifrit do show up, but they actually aren't so much associated with the Batini. They're associated with the Disparate, the Taftani. I'm sure there'll be a Disparate show at some point. But the Ali Batin are the subtle ones, is their other name. They don't believe in vulgarity. They're capable of vulgar magic, but it's a huge taboo. And their paradigm is all about unity. The idea that all things are actually one thing, and all separation is a mistake, a lie, and we should seek to re-enter unity. They spend most of their time in the traditions being like, no, we're all different, but we're all the same, and we can work together, and we should work together, and we can see how our paradigms are similar, and we'll come together and merge into one thing. The weird, dirty secret about the Ali Batin, when you read their write-ups, is that they're kind of technocratic. Like,
really?
They were bordering on fascist in terms of how they ran their own internal processes. Especially the modern Ali Batin are known for randomly reading each other's minds to suss out traitors. You should just expect, if you're in the Ali Batin, your mind will be read to assure of your loyalty.
Reminds me of Psychor from Babylon 5.
Yeah, I mean, the whole technocratic union that the technocracy accomplished, the Batini really wanted that out of the traditions. And when they left, it was them finally throwing their hands up in the air and being, we're done. We're done.
Fuck it. We're out.
It was that combined with some of the violence against Middle Eastern cultures that the council didn't do anything about. They just kind of went, well...
Like the Crusades?
Oh, no, later.
Later.
The Crusades were done by the time the Council of Nine formed. More of the stuff that was happening around the turn into the 20th century. Because that's when they left. They left right before, I think, right before the Electrodyne... Or no, it was right after the Electrodyne engineers joined. The Batini left. Except no one knows exactly when they left. Because they did this whole big, complicated magical ritual to hide themselves, including the history of what had happened exactly.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
So everyone knows they left. No one knows exactly what year it happened, because they
can't remember.
Yeah.
So we got an empty chair here. Who the fuck is supposed to be sitting here?
Well, and empty for a long time. And it's really brutally frustrating for the traditions, because they had just gotten the Electrodyne engineers, and the seat of matter had been empty since like 1518 or something. I forget the exact year that the Solificati were officially kicked out of the traditions. I think it was actually earlier than that. I think it was like 1490 something. The Solificati were ousted because of Halel's betrayal. And so matter was
1470.
1470, okay, a little earlier than I thought. So Halel's betrayal, the seat of matter was empty for a good 4 centuries. They get someone in it, and then the Batini defect. It was a hit, it was a morale hit. It was a big morale hit.
Jeez, sounds like they had a harder time keeping their little club together than the Cam does.
Oh, yes. Camarilla is infinitely more organized and honestly
Go figure.
powerful than the Council of Nine. As individual mages, way more powerful than individual vampires.
Oh, absolutely. They're really powerful. Mummies are the only ones I can see who actually could give a mage a run for his money.
Yeah, absolutely. The Council of Nine as an organization, not that powerful.
Not if they can't fucking agree on something.
Yeah, basically. So the seat of correspondence is empty for, I forget exactly when the virtual adepts joined. It's been a long time.
Virtual adepts join in shit. Hold on.
I want to say it was the 70s, 60s or 70s.
Probably 60s. It sounds like it would be.
Yeah, and
about then.
That's when you started to see the really rapid rise of computers, because they had been stifled in the Technocratic Union. They had to follow the timeline. And they were like, well, screw your timeline. Computers will fix everything. And they're like, but timeline. And they were like,
Okay, we've got the difference engineers during the Victorian age.
Yeah, and that was the virtual adepts. Similar to the Society of Ether, they changed their name when they left.
1956, the virtual adepts leave the technocracy and go into hiding. 1961, they join the council.
Yeah, and that lines up with sort of the rise of computers. So that was when I was thinking it probably happened. So the seat of correspondence was only vacated for like 50, 60 years. Which is
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the seat of matter, I mean, it was a tenth the period that it was empty. So along come the virtual adepts, and they're kind of outcasts. They kind of have the Society of Ether as allies in the traditions, and those two originally grew out of the same convention. The Difference Engineers were a spin-off from the Electrodyne Engineers within the technocracy, so they have a common root going back well before being a tradition. But the virtual adepts they have a very cyberpunk, kind of wacky kids, we're going to change the world with the internet vibe. But really, they're not that wacky. They're really not. The Society of Ether are freaking nuts. They're like a hair's breadth from being a marauder a lot of the time. Or at least that's how they get played. And the rest of the traditions just really didn't like either one of them. What changed all that was the birth of Dante.
Dante Alighieri?
No.
Oh.
So, you know the tarot card on the front of all the Mage books?
Yeah, the one we used for the ad.
That is Dante.
Oh. He looks like he encompasses all 9 traditions.
He does not. He is a virtual adept.
Is he?
Hence the printer and the computer.
Well, the symbol in his hand, the glove. I got I figured Void Engineer for the glove that he's wearing, on his left hand.
No, he's virtual adept. And the thing about Dante that made him so brutally everything is he actually awakened in the womb.
Oh, wow.
He was born awakened, and he just leapfrogged through enlightenment. And he's probably the most powerful virtual adept that has ever lived, and he's a big reason why the tradition is respected. Because nobody wanted to respect them when they joined.
Oh, of course not.
It's hard not to respect Dante. It's
you will respect me.
And yeah,
these are not the droids you're looking for.
Awakened, and I will reshape all reality around my will from like 5. Yeah, Dante was a force to be reckoned with. But yeah, so the virtual adepts started out as a very hackers. I mean, we've all seen hackers.
I own hackers. Do you know they made 2 sequels?
Oh, no, they didn't.
Yeah, they did.
No, I don't want to go into quiet. So I'm not going to think about that.
Yeah, right?
I've seen them. They're bad, man. They're really bad.
I'm sure they are.
They are horrible. Oh, my God. It was just something I did not need to know, but I do that to everybody who mentions.
Sharing this knowledge.
I do it deliberately to piss people off. Anyway, okay, so let's. We're getting ahead of ourselves with virtual adepts. That's in V. We're not in V yet. Okay, the Akashic Brotherhood. Now, from the impression I get from these guys is, I assume everybody here has already seen Doctor Strange. That's the Akashic Brotherhood to me.
No, that's really not the Akashic Brotherhood at all. That's the Wulung.
Really?
That's so what you see. Yeah, what you see in Doctor Strange, what's represented there, those would be Wulung, which are high ceremonial Asian mages, the sorcerers of the court. That's much more what you see in that film.
Well, I was looking at the combat and, conjuring weaponry out of pure reality, or mirror reality. That's the whole training sequence. Hell, the password for the fucking Wi-Fi is Shambhala. So, I'm sorry, it's just gave me a very Oriental feel, and the mystic martial arts, kind of Oriental, I guess. And I don't know if Oriental is a PC term anymore.
Not so much.
Not so much. Okay, hey, I come from a different time. Okay, Asian.
Yeah, well, so the big difference there is what you see in Doctor Strange. Yeah, the martial arts is more the Akashic Brotherhood, but the martial arts in Doctor Strange weren't nearly as pronounced as all of the high ceremonial stuff and the library
and the warping of reality when you're fighting through New York. Yeah.
The stuff with the fans.
I kept, when what was the bad guy's name? I kept thinking, Paradox, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass in a minute. But of course it never gets there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember his name. The villain in that
Mads Mikkelsen's character.
Which one?
Mads Mikkelsen's character, and he's the head bad guy.
The one with the eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Dormammu.
No, he's the disciple of Dormammu.
Yeah.
I'm talking. Yeah. You're gonna make me go to IMDb, but I don't want to open another fucking
tab. He's the face of Dormammu in that movie, and then the big villain is actually Dormammu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think he's talking about was it the same actor?
No.
No, that Mick played Hannibal Lecter on Hannibal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he was just the most
What it actually is.
What?
What are they? The Akashic Brotherhood. What's their philosophy?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
What's their magic like?
So their magic. Oh, go ahead.
No, I said, where do they like to hang out?
So the Akashic Brotherhood I'm trying to think of a really good reference. The Akashic Brotherhood would be closer to what you see in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or what you see in a lot of the wuxia films, especially the more outlandish wuxia films. A lot of the Akashic one of the big advantages.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah. One of the advantages is they're actually one of the traditions that can stay pretty coincidental. Their use of forces is less likely to be a fireball and more likely to be a kick that is enhanced several times over with prime and with just additional movement and force, and brings a thunderclap and just additional momentum with it, and so you take like 3 times damage.
His name is Caecilius, by the way.
Oh, okay, yeah, the villain.
Yeah.
So there is some stuff in the Akashic Brotherhood write-up on more ritual magic, especially in the earlier books, but then they kind of moved all of that out to the Wulong. They created a separate group for that, because it didn't really make sense to have it all in one place.
So what you're saying is it's less Doctor Strange and more Dragon Ball Z?
Probably with less huge balls of energy, but...
Over 9,000, yes. Okay, just making sure I got it straight in my head.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be likely to have the traveling mystic medicine seller would kind of fall into the Akashic paradigm. The deep enlightenment attaining meditation practices in Buddhism would be part of the Akashic paradigm. That would probably be a lot of how they would approach and perceive spirit. You wouldn't have the big ornate, almost the parts of Doctor Strange that feel very hermetic. You wouldn't have all that stuff.
Okay. Also, from looking at the sanctuaries, there's freaking magical weapons all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. The the other thing...
Well, artifacts in general, not necessarily weapons.
Yeah.
Because the thing that he imprisons Caecilius with isn't technically a weapon. It's just, something that's really cool and has some magical properties. And that's, the cape was also something that I don't ever remember in the comic book as the cape being that funny.
Yeah, the Cape was the best character in that movie.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when dude's trying to go this way and the cape keeps dragging him back. And I'm like, dude, that is so funny.
Yeah. So the other thing that's kind of fun and interesting about the Akashic Brotherhood is that their, greatest sworn enemies are one of the other traditions. They are lifelong sworn enemies with Euthanatoi.
Whoa, okay.
And so the center of one of their greatest historic battles was the birth of the Alibatine. So you have a really interesting backstory there.
Okay. So, we're going to lose Eric here for a minute. But he'll be back. No, he'll be back. He's just the doggy got to go potty.
Oh, okay.
I did that before I started. So, all right, moving on. The Corps Celeste.
Corps Celeste. They're interesting. They tend to get thought of as the Christian tradition by certain players, but they're really not. They're the monotheist tradition. They're meant to embody the idea that there is one central sentience that created and guides and is the center of all existence. And in theory, they don't really care how you view that one sentience.
You really don't want me to get involved in that conversation. Go ahead, though.
I am just telling you their view of paradox.
Yeah, I know, and I get you there. You get into an argument with some of those people and go, I have the math that proves you're wrong, but you won't understand it.
Well, okay, but again, we're talking about Mage. There is no proof. That works because of the technocracy. I mean,
your math only works in your paradigm.
So okay.
In their paradigm.
Well, that seems to be the case in most of these traditions. It's, it only works because I believe it works kind of situation. And that's pretty much all of them.
Well, I mean, that's the core of magic. That's what magic is in Mage, is you have this ability to change reality, but it's kind of like if you have the largest, most well-charged battery in the world. If you don't have the perfectly constructed set of transistors
or capacitor
to channel that electricity into something, it doesn't matter how many electrons are in that box in your lap.
Right.
And belief.
If you have no flashlight, then the battery is useless.
Pretty much. Belief is the flashlight. You have to have something you believe strongly enough to actually summon that will and make it manifest in the world.
And then the beam is the actual effect of said magic.
Exactly.
I actually like that. That's a really good way to describe that situation.
Well, and it was only really described that way for the first time in M20.
Really?
In Mage First Edition and Second Edition, I heard Phil talk about this in an interview, I think, on Ultra Culture. And for anyone who's listening who's super interested in Mage, look up the Ultra Culture podcast and look up the episode where Jason Louv interviews Phil Bricado. It is an interview worth listening to.
Oh, I'm gonna have to. You're gonna have to. I can't make note of it right now, but
I'll shoot you a link to that.
Yeah, shoot me a link to that one because I want to go listen.
Yeah, it's worth listening to. But fair warning about that. It's an actual occult podcast. Jason Louv is an occultist, so some of the conversation will deviate out of Mage into topics that you think should still be in Mage, but That's just
But
the nature
aren't-
of that conversation.
Oh, okay. I was a comparative religion major, man.
Yeah. For the listeners.
That sounds like a Thursday when I was in school.
But yeah, so that whole channeling of belief thing, he said in that interview, he was figuring that out just as he left White Wolf. And he hadn't had a chance to write it. And then they brought him back to do M20, and he was able to take all those ideas that he was like just finally starting to put the pieces together when he left, and then he had another 10 years to sort of mull it over.
Yeah,
and
perfect it.
And that's really what's in Mage 20th.
That's awesome. I do love that they are re-releasing, and it sounds like they're going to re-release all the main core books as V20.
Well, at least the main 5.
Werewolf, Vampire, Mage,
Wraith and Changeling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask about Wraith. I was like, yeah, we need a V20 Wraith. Man.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Wraith it's an art.
It's going to be the last one, I bet.
It's an art direction. I think it'll probably be out by the end of the year.
Because I'm actually going to buy a hard copy of that.
Oh, I backed it.
Did
I
you?
have multiple copies of that.
Yeah, but you know what I'm looking forward to is getting that PDF of the V20 that we got for backing Princess Gambit.
Yeah,
because I really want to read that bad.
It's good. It's really good. But we should totally get back to the tradition. So,
yes, Cult of Ecstasy, my second favorite tradition.
Okay, well, the Cult of Ecstasy, they're weird and misunderstood. Most people talk about them as, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Which is part of it, but it's not all of it.
To be honest, I think it's the least interesting part of it.
Smoking a joint and making time flow slower is kind of cool.
It is, and I mean, that idea did come out of the weird ways that time perception shifts, especially.
Exactly. No, I knew that.
But so when you get into the deeper writings on the Cult of Ecstasy, though, they start to do things like reframe it around, well, a lot of chefs are members of the Cult of Ecstasy.
Yeah, because some people get a very endorphic high off of really good food.
Yeah, but it isn't just the endorphic high. There are also members of the Cult of Ecstasy who are aesthetic, and they don't take part in excess.
Intoxicants.
Well, yeah, and they'll push themselves deep into fasting and into extremes because you almost go into a different kind of state of delirium based off that.
Yeah.
And it's about reaching the altered states and the wisdom and magic that can come out of that. And so, a lot of people pick them up and go raw sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but there's a lot of nuance in that tradition.
Well, like I've said, if I was going to Google a mage, it would be one of them.
Oh, that would be a terrible idea.
Of course, it would kill his avatar eventually, but that's not the point.
No, so it's not that. I mean, the thing about the Cult of Ecstasy is the Cult of Ecstasy is incredibly anti-addiction, and that's a.
And yeah, that blood becomes addictive immediately.
Yeah, and so I think it would actually be harder to keep a member of the Cult of Ecstasy ghouled than almost any other tradition. Because part of the training of the Cult of Ecstasy is to recognize the signs of addiction and to immediately deal with them. Because the instant you become addicted to an experience, you're no longer in control over it, and it's no longer a viable instrument of your magic. So they are seeking the altered state, but once they become addicted, they're no longer in control of that altered state, and it is useless for magic. And so that's an integral part of their training, is how to go into these spaces with these chemicals, with these experiences, without losing yourself to them. So I think like 2 weeks into that ghouling, they would be like, oh, I know exactly what's happening, and we're going to fix this.
Okay. I hadn't actually thought of that.
Yeah,
but
that's pretty integral to that tradition.
But it was one of the ways to get around the the celerity temporis rule. That was my original combination, and I think in combinations because of Magic the Gathering, by the way, Jacob.
Yeah, that I don't know that you would want that combination, because I know as a storyteller, nothing is as vulgar as multiple actions. It's one of those things where it's just like, if you do multiple actions, you're taking paradox. So if you have them do if you have one of them do time on you, and then you use celerity, that's going to compound, because you've now introduced paradox attracting true reality warping magic into your relatively safe discipline magic, and the two will interact. And the thing about true magic is, when you look at the paradox impacts that, like, modified extraordinary citizens have, they're not mages, they're not working true magic, but it doesn't matter, the true magic is woven into them, and so they take the paradox backlash.
Oh.
You would be subject to the same phenomenon, and it would be doubled over by the interaction with your powers.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, you'd get fucked by
I thought that was Eric. Okay, so let's talk about the Dream Speakers.
The Dream Speakers. I have a hard time talking about the Dream Speakers, because of all of the traditions, they fall into the let's throw a bunch of cultures into a bucket and put them on together.
I was getting that impression, because there's so many different kinds of shaman, you know.
Well, and
an African shaman and a freaking Native American shaman is nothing. They aren't anything alike.
No.
But they're still shaman, you know, and I can understand how throwing them all into that bucket would not be, you would have some serious conflicts.
And that was one of the things that goes back to first edition Mage, where they wrote it and then they handed it to Phil, and they told Phil, you can't fundamentally change anything right away. And he's talked about the fact that there are a lot of things he would have done dramatically differently, but he doesn't own the IP, and so he can't. And the Dream Speakers are one of those things that he's shifted a little bit, and shifted a little bit, and shifted a little bit, and done a little out over here, and put in a disparate, and put in a backstory about the Dream Speakers being colonialist, because they are. And he's done what he can. They're better than they used to be. I'm still not a fan. Modern Dream Speakers, I think in a modern setting, especially in America, the Dream Speakers are a great tradition for, I'm a white neo-pagan urban shaman.
Yeah.
You are a Dream Speaker, my friend. Go forth and Dream Speak.
Or individuals who are trying to get in touch with their ancestral roots.
Yes, but they're
indigenous peoples or African Americans that are trying to get in touch with the cultures that have been taken away from them. Would be also a good thing for that concept.
I would argue it would be a better concept for people who are totally out of place, especially with African Americans. You have the Bata. You have really bright, vibrant, living spiritual traditions in America that have roots back to Africa, and taking a Bata character and being part of that culture overall, I would think would be a lot more satisfying. I'm also a white guy, so take that for all of the great insult it's worth. You know, and in terms of indigenous peoples, I look at Dream Speakers, and the Dream Speakers were the first Dream Speaker that was in the first Cabal was Native American, and he came over. But that whole story is, he came over, the first Cabal happened, the first Cabal fell apart. He went back over to America and went, screw all of you.
Fuck you.
This is dumb. And so maybe they think warned his people about the coming Daedalans, but then the Dream Speakers are still there in the council. Like, it's a very unresolved story.
Apparently, dude's name is Star of Eagles.
Yes.
And Niobe. There were two.
Yeah. Well, not in the original Cabal. In the first Cabal, there was only the one character. You can give me just a second. I have the Fragile Path in front of me. Oh, First Cabal. Hunt is declared. Nope. What is his name? He doesn't have one of the chapters, because I think he was one of the ones who was killed by... No, he wasn't killed by the Gabrielites. He escaped. But I know he's not one of the chapters, because not every member of the Cabal got a chapter in this book. Yeah, I forget his name. Wait. Oh, this... maybe Walking Hawk?
Oh.
Yep, maybe him.
All right, there you go.
Walking Hawk, the Orty, he does have one of the chapters. I had remembered that incorrectly. Yes. And so he goes back and he, is incredibly displeased with the traditions at the end of everything that happened with the First Cabal, which if you read that story, it'll make sense. But then the Dream Speakers are still there because they don't just encompass Native American shamans. And honestly, given the relationship that Native cultures have with Europeans, I think if I ever ran a modern game again, the Dream Speakers wouldn't include any Native Americans. They just wouldn't. Native Americans would be disparates. Kind of stop.
Okay.
I cannot, in my mind, reconcile people... I can't reconcile Native communities taking part in their spirituality being part of a primarily Eurocentric political coalition. Nothing about that gels with my understanding of the world.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about the Dream Speakers.
Okay, then. We're moving on to the Euthanatoi.
Why?
Well, because they're next. It's going alphabetically. And I see you're back. Welcome back.
I'm guessing he's asking about my last statement because he probably missed some of my...
Oh, okay. Oh, he was listening to catch up.
Yeah, and I heard that last little tidbit there about the Dream Speakers and Native people and stuff, and now, because Dream Speakers are one of my, actually, the ones I really like a lot.
Well, then you talk to us and tell us.
Just Native American, and that's the thing is that the traditions, the whole thing is all about they want their beliefs to affect reality. So, Native American beliefs aren't exclusive to Native Americans. The belief system itself is based on spirits, and that's a big part of what they're doing. And those spirits were also in Celtic mythology, all of the different places, all over the place, Neanderthal, so on and so forth, believed that there were spirits in the rocks, the trees, the animals, so on and so forth. They're also the magicians that are closer to the Umbra and everything that runs wild in there. So it's not just that Native Americans chilling on a reservation that they were forced to go onto. It's everybody that believes in that sort of belief system.
So that argument, though, kind of gets into the why do we have disparates argument. Because that goes back to the original concept of the traditions, which were they're a big bucket, and we throw everyone into the bucket that kind of fits that paradigm, and yay, which is how a lot of the other splats work in the world of darkness, but a lot of those other splats are backed by some sort of supernatural dynamic. Werewolf tribes are by blood, vampire clans are by blood, the Kiths are by, actual cosmological birth into a particular species of Fae. The thing about the traditions are their political affiliations. Like they are, when you go back to the story, the only thing about the traditions is that they're a political organization. So part of why
we didn't catch that.
Are we reading two different books?
If you go back and look at the history...
I don't view the traditions that way at all. Reading the core concept of Mage that way at all. No.
But I mean, that's their history. When you go back and read,
the history, you can... honestly, it doesn't mean jack. The important thing about the entire war for reality that's called Ascension is that, if you look at the introductions in each of the Splat books, if you look at the very beginning of the Mage book, it's about shaping reality with your vision. And you go with like-minded people that want to work together, because on your own you're not that powerful, but as a group you're more powerful.
So, but the argument that can be boiled down to just, oh, there are spirits, erases a lot of cultural significance around their spiritual beliefs, their particular spiritual beliefs, so just going to game design, the whole thing about whether or not they choose to be politically affiliated, that's what the Ngoma are about. That's what the Bata are about. That's why the Batini left. There are specific groups that when we refuse to take part in this colonialist structure, and therefore we're going to remain our own separate craft. And the Dream Speakers, you look at their backstory, have the most of that. The thing is, that backstory was introduced after the first edition book, because that was all designed during the first edition and second edition lines, not when the Dream Speakers were actually designed. For me, that kernel is where I find the most truth. It's not about, we believe in the spirit world. It's about a much more core cultural identity, and for me, those are the themes that are more important to me. And, I mean, the fact that those stories are also present in the canon speak to the fact that that's at least viewed by some people that have been involved in the development of Mage as an integral part of that story. So that's what I tend to lean on, and I know not everybody does, but that's kind of where I'm not a big fan of the Dream Speakers. I'm much more in the Bata's corner on that one.
Okay. The Batar aren't in the main book.
They're in M20. They're in M20, and that story is part of the canon. And they were introduced in previous texts. I mean, they were a pre-existing craft.
That's not my point.
I had never heard of the Bata either. I see them now that they are in M20. I haven't read through the whole M20 yet. But yeah, I'd never heard of them before either. So I actually had to look to see.
Grab the fourth book and plop it down to somebody and explain the traditions to them. It's a completely different story. Does that make sense?
I guess it depends on the person and how they would approach it. I would explain the traditions in terms of the way their cultural history is framed around their organization. I view them as I view them as political entities first and foremost. I always have.
So the whole core thing of Ascension doesn't apply.
No, it absolutely applies, but it's a political alliance.
Okay,
that formed. What?
Go on, man. Go on. Go ahead.
So it's a political alliance that formed to fight for Ascension, but it still goes back to politics. I mean, politics is the groundwork of which all reality shaping exists. I mean, when you really get down to it, that whole argument you made about finding like-minded people, there are a million axes where you can be like-minded or opposed-minded with the same person or group of people, and so that's absolutely what it's about. But for me, it's not just about the paradigm that makes my magic work. It's about a much broader, what is my place in the world? What is the space I take up? What is my worth? It's not just about spirits. So there's a much broader human social story there that I feel like if you just limit yourself to the lots of different cultures smashed together in one tradition model, you end up erasing. And that's core to a lot of the stories I want to tell. I did a lot of that in my Sorcerer's Crusade game. I focused a lot on, you're right here at the beginning of colonialism. Oh, look, it's the Portuguese landing in India. What does that mean? What does it mean that their whole relationship with the Hindu people, is framed by what's going on up in northern India with,
What you're talking about here, okay? Because you're applying it to a political association, because that's what you believe that this game is all about.
No, just the traditions.
You can take your example of the Portuguese landing in India. Now, there are Indians that believe in the same thing native people here believe, and there are also those that are Hindu, which believe in something very similar to what they're talking about. And then if you go on the other hand, you've got voodoo, which also ties into believing in what these spirits can do.
Santeria.
So if it's a political affiliation, and that's all it is, that's all any of these are, just, what party am I going to vote for? Then all these different groups that believe the same thing, but just
so I'm gonna,
according to what you just said.
So I'm gonna push back on the idea that they believe the same thing, because I don't think they do. I don't think to go for a model that's much closer to the likely lived experiences of people listening. Jews, Christians, and Muslims believe dramatically different things. They all worship the same God. They do not believe the same thing. Not even close.
No.
And to say that the people in America that practice shamanistic, any term you want to put on it, believe the same things as people who practice Shinto in Japan, as people who practice spiritual expressions of Hinduism, and Hinduism is polytheistic and strongly spiritual manifestation in the world. Like, those are dramatically different beliefs.
What I'm saying is not that we all think the same thing. I'm talking about the core of our beliefs. Now, you just said that many different versions of Christians, Catholics, yada yada. But we all believe one major thing. But we're all different. And that's the way, in my opinion, each one of the traditions is. We have a similar viewpoint on what something is. We just call it something a little bit different. And that's how people get along in the tradition.
So, that's how they were written in early editions. I'll just say I prefer M20, and they're written very differently. They're written very much in line with more of the source books and less of the core book in M20. I prefer that.
There you go. So, moving on to the youth sanatory.
Well, but you know what? This conversation, though, actually highlights the difficulties with the traditions trying to cooperate and get along.
Oh, yeah,
because there is so many different perceptions or interpretations on fundamentally what exactly it is that they are doing together and why they are grouped together. And, we've got two players with the same source material that interpret the concept of the traditions in very different ways. And I just think that really highlights where what we were talking about earlier, that it's so difficult for the traditions to actually
work together. Yeah,
even within the same tradition, you're going to have people that aren't going to see things in the same slant of light. It wasn't as much as a segue as it may seem, because it's really the fundamental aspects of the game.
I like it.
So
that was actually
together, different thought groups, and that's every gamer in existence together saying this is cool and this is what I think is cool about it.
Yeah, and yeah. I know a lot of. So I'll bring up a conversation, and I just thought of it, that I had online in the Facebook Mage group, where there was a similar sort of divided view, and it was someone was asking what the traditions would be like in medieval Japan, or not medieval Japan. It was Renaissance. It was after the council had been formed in Japan, and I took a bunch of Japanese history courses in college, and I responded just saying, well, here's what some of these practices would be like, but really the traditions wouldn't be there, because the traditions organized here at this place in this date, and from that point until way past when you're talking about, Japan had closed borders and no one was allowed in. And you might have a few people that used connection, but chances are the local mages actually enforced those closed borders. In a World of Darkness setting, that would make sense. And so they probably couldn't just get in with magic. And there was a lot of back and forth in conversation. No, Shinto belongs in Dream Speakers and it's the same thing. And other people saying, no, it's a political organization. There are other groups that didn't join. I will say Phil moderates that group, and he did jump in and say, closed borders, the traditions wouldn't have gotten in there. There would be none of this. These 2 or 3 people posted and talked about. But
none of this foolishness.
Yeah, indigenous. Well, indigenous is the wrong term because the Japanese people aren't indigenous to Japan. This is the Ainu, but the Japanese people had practiced in XYZ in these ways. But he. And this goes back to he's the one that developed all the disparates, and part of the disparates was there's this history that these groups organized here. The only explanation is they organized as people, but they're organized in much broader senses than a political act like that would result in. How do I reconcile that? He has slowly shifted it towards what would this group of people sitting in this room together really look like? What would the political lines actually end up being? Which makes the story about a lot of messy, colonial, cultural conflicts that aren't what the first couple of editions were about. And I know not everybody likes that. So, golden rule at your table, there are editions that focus on that broader setting, and that's a super legit way to play. It's not so much the core canon at this point. It's not how I choose to play, but I do want to say I know a lot of people that play Mage that way, and it's super legit.
Okay. Can we move on to the Athanatoid now?
Sure.
Okay. So, Eric, let's get your impression of the Athanatos, the seat of entropy.
Give me a second, man.
Okay.
I think of the traditions, I gotta wrap my head around the entire concept of each one.
Okay. Okay, Jake?
It's like little branches of each one that you gotta figure out how to make coherent.
I already spoke a bit earlier about my experiences and the level of enjoyment I have with Euthanatoi, because the whole idea of resolving and interacting with fate. The one thing, and this is maybe most of the games I've played have been really street level. There hasn't been a lot of involvement with the rest of the group. So it was okay, well, this is the tradition I'm following, but what kind of organization or whatever that the tradition itself was involved in didn't really seep into any of the Mage games that I was involved with. So I'm not really sure about the Euthanatos themselves, what I can really add to the conversation. But
Rolling down.
at least, some of you guys seem a lot more versed in the canon history and whatnot on the different traditions than I.
I'm just going through the different flat books just so I can. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it.
It's just that there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of, I guess, take the Euthanatos. But I mean, when you're dealing with, entropy as a whole, you've got kind of different. And again, this can also fall into the different ways of belief when it comes to decay, death, things like that. There's a lot of different it's just taking every culture's death mythos and putting it together. So everything from Egyptian people are going to think differently about how things go about than everybody else. But at its core, it's basically everything decays, everything dies. But if it didn't die, there wouldn't be any more life. If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. Yeah. No, it does. It's the whole immortality thing. It sounds great on its face, but you'd run out of fucking space pretty quick.
Yeah,
in that school of thought, you can go about it so many different ways. I mean, everything from a necromancer to things that passing your life to maybe even, I mean, a priest of some kind who thinks something completely differently, but happens to be, a death mage, Euthanatos.
Well, and one of the interesting things I find about the Euthanatos, or the Chakravanti is the other name for them, they have one Greek name and one Indian. I don't entirely know all the reasons for what the interconnections between those two sects within the tradition are, but they're kind of the last vestige of functional Wyrm left in the world of darkness. I mean, they're all about what the Wyrm was supposed to do, and somehow they pull off doing that job without falling to the corruption that all of the other Wyrm factions fall to. I don't know that that's ever really a focus, but I find it interesting about them.
Yeah, that would be the Weaver's fault.
Well, yeah, but I mean, how do they avoid the Weaver fate? Like, how do they pull off all that primordialism without becoming a fan?
Centuries of tradition.
Exactly. Okay, where are we at on time? We got 15 minutes. The last three should be able to cover. The Order of Hermes. Oddly enough, not even in the top 5 of my favorites.
Well, they're not important because
we're not going to go there.
I mean, the Order of Hermes. Yeah.
All the good ones left that tradition in the beginning of the Common Eras, right?
Something like that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's how that works. I don't know. The Order of Hermes is super interesting to me, partially because I'm not interested in them at all. Like, they are more diverse and more complicated and have more houses and have their fingers in more canon than anybody else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I look at them and I go, Golden Dawn. Done. I get you. Let's move on with our lives.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's kind of the Order of Hermes. I mean, I once heard their paradigm described as their belief is that they're better than you and they back it up by being right.
Yeah, right? That's how that works.
I mean...
So, right? Truth is truth. You may not like it, but...
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of high ritual magic and sacred geometry and sigils and angels.
A lot of ritual magic.
Yeah, and they have like a technomantic house. I don't know all the houses that are still running because I get them mixed up with the historic houses that have fallen. The a house within there for a while, but that was a weird kind of retcon revised thing.
And of course, the House Tremere before they became vampires.
Well, yeah, that was before the Order of Hermes was a tradition. Yeah, I mean, they were kind of the...
Looks like shape-shifting, magical theory, enigma, druids, war magic, mundane affairs, messengers, fairies, justice, hierarchy, magical dueling, and will and enchantment.
Yeah. So everything. They're kind of the she of Mage. Yeah. I don't know. I'd love there to be another opinion on this, and because I know people love the Order of Hermes, but
I don't like them, but I do know enough of the history.
They're totally necessary. Like, they are a cornerstone of the Mage story and the World of Darkness, and I'm glad they're there. They make so much of the other canon tick, and I love Porthos Fitzempress to death as a character, but I don't know that I'll ever play one.
I can see how that would probably be true. Okay, Sons of Ether.
Science!
Blinded me with science. And that's the matter seat.
Yeah, that is the matter seat. Were you saying something, Aaron?
Yeah, I was saying spaceships in the Umbra.
Spaceship, or if you want to get really wacky, dirigibles and the Umbra.
Yeah, that's the shit. Dirigibles, man. I've always thought of the Sons of Ether being kind of steampunk.
Oh well. So lots of modern Mage players think of them as steampunk, and it actually makes me a little crazy. I love them to death, and I love the Electrodyne Engineers as steampunk with the whole Victorian aesthetic, because that was the height of the Electrodyne Engineers. If you go back to 1st and 2nd edition, and I think revised as well, they were 50s pulp, science fiction, Buck Rogers, space.
Oh, okay. Ray guns, shit like that.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, oh my god, let's do pulp Mage.
Let's go.
Right?
Go, Eric. Go, man.
Yeah.
Go, man. Robot. Robot. What?
X-ray specs. I can see everybody naked.
There you go.
Exactly. I love the Society of Ether for that. And then along came M20, and there is this beautiful, stunning picture for them that is super steampunk. And I'm just like, couldn't we have saved this for Victorian Mage and put it into the Electrodyne Engineers? Because this is a magnificent piece of art, but that's where this belongs.
Yes.
What am I looking at? I have stood up in defense of these pulp Sons of Ether on many occasions.
Under the battery.
What?
Lightning.
Exactly.
It's
Like,
in
you
a
don't-
tinfoil.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Society of Ether. They're fantastic, and they have ray guns. Like, and they do ridiculous things with toasters. I mean...
Yeah, right?
I need some bubble gum.
A toothpick, a roll of dental floss.
Yeah.
I'm building a boat.
Yeah, but there was a great story in the back of the Void Engineer Convention book, the new one, about the Void Engineers going out into space and finding a group of Etherites in a balloon. They were in a balloon.
Just hanging out.
Let's go into space in a balloon.
Let's do
and I
that.
was just like, that's so Etherite.
Okay, we've still got two traditions left, and we've got 9 minutes to do them, man. So, Verbena. That seemed to be one of the ones New Wave wanted to hear more about.
Oh, okay. Witches? I mean witches.
Druids, witches.
Yeah. Druids, witches. What was the name of them? Oh, my mind has gone blank. There was a Dark Ages mage group. The Valdermen. The Valdermen, which I think were the Druids, were one of the groups that grew into the Verbena. Yeah, Verbena are fun, circle, dancing naked at midnight around
on the solstice.
On the solstice, working with entrails of animals and blood, and they're visceral, and I like the Verbena, they're fun, but I was Wiccan in high school, so,
I think we were all Wiccan at one point or another, and then I realized how silly it was, and how my fucking college completely ruined me for any of the religious outlook, It's very strange, especially as a physics minor. So, yeah, it was very you'd think that it was fairly disseparate as far as if you're gonna go physics minor, comparative religion was not major to take.
No, not so much, but,
But a friend of mine actually double majored in physics and philosophy, and I thought the same thing. But it turns out that's not true. It's actually very similar. Speaking of which, the fellow everybody here will know this. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The author died yesterday.
Oh, that is both sad and strangely appropriate that we're doing this show.
Yeah.
Because the guy who was in charge of First Edition Mage, I said it was sort of formed by a committee, but the guy who's kind of spearheaded that based a lot of it off of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle
That's
Maintenance.
kind of why I brought it up. But yeah, he was 86, so he had a good run.
Certainly, yeah.
He most definitely had a good run. Anything else about the verbena?
I don't know, Eric, have you done much with the verbena?
A little bit here and there, but I think we summed it up pretty good.
Okie dokie. I hope, anyway, that if you've got a question, I suggest you get it in now. We've only got 6 minutes, so the show's going to run a little short tonight. I mean, it's actually going to run correct time, but we lost about 10 minutes at the beginning of the show and haven't had any issues since. So, oh, Jesus, no, dude. That doesn't sound like fun to me. There's too much nature involved. Fuck all that.
Clad dancing.
Yeah, covered in blood.
Sure,
Doesn't have to be yours.
That's true. I mean, no, I've been to, Beltane and Imbolc gatherings, and, back when I was Wiccan, and, the naked thing never bothered me. It's just, I just kind of grew out of that whole spiritual outlook. If you wanted to describe me now, I'm a Taoist druid. I keep looking for the tree that stands at the center of the universe, but somebody keeps moving it.
That's an interesting way of looking at things. But we have one tradition left, don't we? Technically.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We still
program the future.
These are my favorite. That's my favorite tradition. The virtual adepts. I love them. I do. Mastery of correspondence. Summoning digital demons.
Well, we talked about them some
Yes,
earlier.
spam Satan.
But yeah, virtual adepts, hackers.
Yeah, elite hackers.
Well, ask any hacker, they will tell you they're elite.
That's true. They tend to be a bit more arrogant than most of the general populace. Yeah. For instance, The Core, the movie, The Core. I forget his real name. He's also on Z Nation. DJ Qualls. He's what I think of when I think of virtual adept.
Yeah, but you can also throw in the guy who programmed the computers at Jurassic Park in there too.
Yeah. Newman. It's not really Newman, but yeah, you get my point.
It's their nickname among the traditions. I don't know if this ever showed up in a book, but I've talked to a lot of players that use this term, are the virtually inept.
Oh, no.
Which goes back to their general unpopularity with more mystic mages.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, they kind of only made their space in the traditions because of Dante. They were allowed in, but they were very second class for a while.
Well, once computers got better.
Well, it doesn't turn out well.
You're going to have to repeat that, Eric. I cut you off. My bad.
Yeah, that verbena simulation 4 times now. It just didn't work out
well. No.
Oh, your Order of Hermes? You know Lord British? Or any of the
yeah, no shit, my man, Richard Garriott. Yes! That was the first MMO that I was talking about earlier. Ultima Online technically was the first MMO. And I beta tested. That was so much fun. It really was. They did something that nobody had done yet, which was create a community online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was where a lot of the terms that still get used today, PK, that came from Ultima, player killer, because there wasn't any safe zones. There wasn't, if some guy wanted to nuke you, that's what happened. It didn't matter where you were, and the whole thing about having to run back to your body and pick up all your shit, at least whatever dude left behind after he buggered off. That's the kind of shit you just, it was fun. It was. I lost 2 girlfriends to that game.
Oh, harsh.
Yeah. Well, I was spending a lot of time online, man. Really did. So, all right, guys, we are coming up on the end of the show for the night. We're looking like we're running about 20 minutes short on the. Is there anything, any last minute before I do my announcements about what's coming up next?
Not really. Just if you LARP this game, your brain's gonna hurt.
Oh God, yeah.
I actually have the rule book for that. The Mind's Eye Mage book.
I think the Mind's Eye Mage book more or less boils down to rotes. Like, you purchase your spheres and you get the things you can do with your spheres pre-approved by the STs. I think there's leeway to basically just pre-approve new rotes at the beginning of each game, but you basically have to get the systems signed off on. I think. I've never played it, but I've talked to some people about it. Yeah, it's I don't know. It'll make your head hurt. Just having like
I've heard nothing but horrible things about it.
Well, I mean,
and but for good reason. And I'm not saying it didn't. This was not, and like I said, I own the book. I've read it. I'm right there on board. It is not a good system. It is not. It was not thought out.
Well, I mean, I think even if you got the system perfect, you get 20 mages in a room together.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I could deal with 20 kindred, but yeah. I don't know about. No, I'm good. So, all right. Anywho, we are at the end of the show. I want to thank the folks that will be listening to this later. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody. We'd like to see more folks in the chat. We get some really good folks in general, Sabrina and New Wave, and I think we had a bit of an issue with the last 2 weeks ago, but we're good. Next show is the first of the independent clans. We're going to be covering the Giovanni / Cappadocians. So,
nice.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do, and Victor's already signed up for that one.
I love me some necromancers.
So I'm not sure who our second guest will be.
They're traditionally my least favorite clan, but since I just started storytelling Independent Alliance LARP with the Sedite and Giovanni sect, I'm getting a little bit of an appreciation for them. So I'm looking forward to that episode.
I do like the Giovanni. I do. I don't know why, but I think they're absolutely hip. So, thank you again for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks. And y'all have a good night. Everybody say bye.
Bye. Bye.